Our next guest was awarded the title Director of the Year by the journal Open Welt in 2013. She comes from Berlin, from a musical background, and initially she wanted to study cello, or maybe double bass, as what I've heard. After studies in art history, theater science and literary science, you switched on to graduating in stage direction on the Hochschule für Musik Hans Eisler in Berlin. Since that, she's been engaged by numerous opera houses in Germany and also internationally. She has won high acclaim, and she's been nominated and won several awards for her work as a director. And from 2011 till 2014, she held the title of stage director at the Staatstheater Mainz. Now, however, we at the National Opera here in Norway have the pleasure of working with her. So, Tatjana.
Thank you.
You have described Violetta Valerie as a material girl, more or less like the song by Madonna, and not a victim. What sort of person is Violetta in your La Traviata?
I think it's La Traviata is maybe Verdi's most modern opera. And also Violetta is a very, very modern character. She's really an emancipated woman. When the opera starts, she earns her own money, and she earns a lot of money by selling herself to people. So that's already something that makes the opera very much related to our times. We find this capitalistic, cold society in which Violetta is making really a good career. And then she learns that she's not going to live for a very long time. She's very ill. And I always feel like this illness suddenly creates for her a kind of freedom, a kind of space where she can find her own way of doing things, because earning money sometimes can be quite hard, even if you have to sell yourself. And there she starts thinking about how to proceed in things. And then she, by chance, Alfredo comes to this party, and I think they don't just fall in love. He's also a bit like her new project. He's like the door out into a new life. So she decides, yes, that could be an alternative, and she decides to live with that man and to be with him and to change to the country. And that's the second act, and what we learn there is that it's not him paying for their life, but it's her selling all her things, her apartment and all her stuff to pay for living there. So also that is very modern again. And I think it's very obvious why it's also in the opera such a scandal that she does it. Because in a way, a man who's paid by a woman, that feels even more strange than a woman being a prostitute. And then, so as you see with this character, there's also connected a story of money that runs all over the piece. In the last act, when she's really going to die, then she starts just giving her money away to poor people, and it's like burning money. Like she really gets from the material girl to an anti-capitalistic icon, I think. And this is so touching, and I think so. Yeah, in a way, it really concerns us and means us, which is great, I think, which opera should do. It's stories about us, and especially Verdi, whom I love because he's like the grandfather of all directors, you know? He's composing more than just music. He's composing really scenes, and his attitude towards opera was always that he picked subjects that he tried to tell in a way that they meant something to his times. It's not a wonder that he was so often in conflict with the censor, with with authorities. For example, Rigoletto, that he also composed in that time, was not allowed to be played as a Schauspiel on stage when he composed it. It was forbidden. And for like 40 years after his opera, it was still forbidden to be shown. And Traviata, I think you said it, the real character, the Alphonsine Duplessis, died just 6 years before he wrote that opera. So it's as if you would write an opera about something that you find in the newspaper today.
But he too was censored He wanted to put up the play originally in the fashion and the costume that was in society as at the time of the composing, but he was censored. He wasn't allowed to do that.
Yeah, poor Giuseppe.
He had to date it back until the 17th
Poor Giuseppe,
century.
he was censored so often. Yeah, also, Un ballo in maschera, then he thought how to save the opera, and he thought about, oh, maybe it should play at the Inuits, you know.
Well, yeah, you reflected upon the anti-capitalism, because I was wanting to ask you about that. And you said that Violetta's freedom is, well, her illness is giving her freedom. And she, you know, she has this persona of a celebrity. She is a celebrity in a society which is driven by money and the competition and the gaze for a scandal and the want for scandal. And yet she wants out of this. She wants to define her own life. She wants to define her own ways and create herself. What is her possibilities for this?
There are not a lot of possibilities, I think. I think, in fact, there's no possibility. And leaving the society and going to the country means also offending the society. It means telling the society, I don't care for you, not even for you giving me money. I really don't want to be with you. And she was like the main entertainment of this society. So it's like the toy is taken away from its owner. It's really a forbidden thing. And in our production, she also gets punished very hard for that. So yeah, no, she really has no other possibility.
Would you say that you've been describing Violetta more or less like a performance artist? What do you mean by that?
Well, when I started working on that opera, I was looking for what kind of women could be a person like TRAVIATA in our times, and I was very interested. Well, in general, I'm very interested in art because my husband is a painter. So I was very interested in female artists, and I was looking for characters like Frida Kahlo, who also was a very strong woman and a creative woman. And then I found, of course, Marina Abramovic. And she made a performance in 1974 in Naples, which I found very, very touching and very close also to that opera. She, as an artist, exposed herself to an audience, and she put like, I think 72 objects on a table, and the audience was allowed for 6 hours to do whatever they wanted to do to her. And it started quite gentle. So the first hour, it was just some people from the audience came, putting flowers into her hand or into her hair, taking pictures, things like that. And then after 1 hour, the situation completely exploded and went into a completely different direction, much more aggressive. So they started cutting off her clothes. They started putting nails into her skin. They hurt her very badly. And the performance ended when one person took a gun with a bullet in it and pointed it to her head. And then the gallerist interfered because he didn't feel any longer responsible for the situation, and he just finished the whole performance. And it was, I think, less after 6 hours than this happened. And then she started moving again. She went through the audience, and it was very interesting that the moment she started moving again, everybody just ran away, and nobody dared looking into her face. And I think this situation of a woman being so much exposed to an audience, and the audience is allowed doing everything, and in a way, when you see pictures by this performance of Marina Abramovic standing in this room naked, really hurt, and there are some pictures where she has tears in her eyes, and anyway she resists. I thought it's so clever what she did, because even if she was passive, she mirrored the society, and she mirrored people that did these things to her. So she was exposed, but the audience was even more exposed, in fact. And I think this is the situation of Violetta, also in the first act, in this party she gives, also in the Flora party, because people come to her and they think they are owners and they think they are allowed doing everything to her because they pay. But then, in fact, we see how society works.
So, but she keeps her distance even then, La Traviata.
Even then, and the only person who's able to touch her then is Alfredo. When he throws money into her face, that's maybe not as bad as things that the other persons did to her, but he's able to hurt her because she's in love with him. That's what makes us vulnerable, I think, when we have feelings then.
But the chorus has a very big part in this, as you say, punishment. How do you conceive their role in the opera, in your production? They have a big part in the whole
They
production.
have a big part, and I think I feel it like in all Verdi operas, the situations wouldn't go far so much into a catastrophe if there wouldn't be any chorus. It's always the public and the audience that puts a pressure onto the soloists and drives things into even worse situations. And it's the same here. So I think Verdi was a composer who really cared for politics. We know also that there were several times in his life where he didn't compose, but he was actually really making politics. He was quite an important personality in Italy, doing not just as a composer, doing politics. And in a lot of his operas, like for example Rigoletto or Macbeth or Un ballo in maschera, you have these kings without projects. So you find a lot of movement around a vacuum in the center of the whole thing. And in La Traviata, the vacuum in the center is substituted by money. So money is really everything to these people. Yeah, but in a way, they are the audience also for the life of Violetta and Alfredo in the country. And also, Alfredo has to define somehow his position as a man in this society. And usually we see, for example, Georges Germain, Alfredo's father, as the main enemy of Violetta. But when you look closer to the score, then you see that Georges Germain is the only one who's not an aristocrat. He's not for example, we have Baron Dufoll, we have Marquis d'Aubigny, we have Gaston, and we learn later that he's also a Vicomte, so everybody has a title, but Germain doesn't have a title. And he's not coming from Paris, he's coming from the Provence. So it's very obvious that he is maybe a businessman, maybe someone who has a vineyard or something, coming to Paris in order to make business. And he depends on society. He has to get into society and he has to make friends there, otherwise he's not able doing his business. And also he tries to make the way smoother for his son, I think. And a character like Alfredo is a character that is very often described in novels, for example, by Balzac or Émile Zola. These young men who sit on the country and maybe write some poems, and then they start thinking, oh, I could be an artist. I should go to the big city to be discovered. And then they go to Paris and they discover, I'm nothing. I'm not an artist. They're much better artists than me, and also they are without job. And I think it's very nice of Verdi. There are a lot of characters that have just like a few lines to sing in the opera. And when you have a very superficial look to the score, you think, oh yeah, it's the Marquis, it's the Baron, it's Gaston. But when you have a closer look, you realize that even in these short lines they have, Verdi describes them so carefully and brings it so much to the point. And for example, a character like Gaston, who's really doesn't seem to be important, but when you have a closer look, then you see, okay, he's the only other tenor in the play. He's always in these parties, but at the same time, he has no girlfriend, so it seems that he's a person without money. So maybe he was one of these guys like Alfredo coming to Parigi for doing some arts, and then because he was funny, because he had ideas, he was invited to that parties and he got spoiled somehow. He was not doing art any longer. And it's very interesting to have a character on stage that is like Alfredo in 10 years or Alfredo 10 years later. And there are a lot of characters where you can find it's like another side of the main characters. Yeah. Also Violetta, there's also another person on the stage called Flora. She's also a prostitute. She's also making her career. and she's like the main competition of Violetta. The opera already starts with some of the party guests coming late, and she asks why, and they say, "Oh, you know, we spent such a beautiful time at Flora's house." So it already feels like her party was so much better than yours. and it's good because Verdi is really very efficient. He's able to create in one line the whole atmosphere and to tell us very detailed about how this society works, like about this competition stuff, about you have to be better, your party has to be better, you have to be faster, you have to be more sexy, you have to have more money. And yeah, I like that really, and it's a lot of fun for the director when you start discovering all these things.
And more fun you can have still, because you have included some sequences in this production that's quite surreal. It's like they're dreamlike sequences, maybe a bit bizarre. At one point, it seems to me like the whole chorus are crawling across the stage diagonally, dressed seemingly like creatures, like chickens, heads of horses. Some have naked suits. Really bizarre, very funny. But what are your ideas behind these sequences?
Yeah. The scene that you just described, this is after the party. So the party is over, and Verdi wrote a very short chorus for the society just to exit. And I wondered why anyway he needs that, because it's nothing, not a big thing going to happen on stage. But then I thought it's a very good moment we can use to switch into the perspective of Violetta, showing how she sees her guest after she met Alfredo. Because it's Alfredo who actually manages to change her perspective onto things. So in the beginning, she's part of this party, and she likes having all these people around. And then when he comes in, she notices, oh, but these people, I'm not sure if I want to mix with them. And they start being different, and she starts looking at them as looking at monsters, you know. And suddenly she like sees their inner lives or their fantasies. Yeah. But there are also other surreal moments, because I really think that what I love about opera is that opera can stretch time or can make time very short, and opera always opens a door into other rooms and to other levels. Music is something that you it's a bit over reality, like flying over reality, and it's very connected to our emotions, and I think also to our fantasies. So I love that opera gives you always these spaces to show something of the inner life of the characters.
Exactly. And something else which is new in this production is you have included more people on stage than we normally see, more characters on stage. For instance, the whole of Alfredo's family is present at one point, and with a specific focus on Alfredo's sister. So can you tell us what you want to emphasize by doing this?
Yeah, well, Alfredo's sister, actually, even if she usually doesn't appear in the opera, is a very important character, because she's the main reason why Violetta decides to follow the argues of Georges Germain, leaving Alfredo, going back to Paris. Because he says, you know, Alfredo has a sister, and this sister has a fiancé, and if the fiancé will hear that we have a prostitute in the family, then of course he will break up this relationship. And I mean, in these times, imagine what could a girl do if she was not from a rich family or a very rich family? A girl couldn't just go to the city having a job. There was no possibility to work. So, or you get married, or nothing. Really very difficult. And I wanted also to have a moment where this sister and Violetta become like sisters and very close together, and where Violetta sees something in that girl that's very connected to her, and she maybe sees a part of her own life in that girl, seeing where everything went wrong in her life.
The turning point.
The turning point, yeah. exactly, the turning point. I read something about the real character of Alphonsine Duplessis, about her. And she was, I think, like 6 years old when her parents died. And then she went to Paris and she was given to some of her relatives, and she started being someone who washes things from people. But then it seems that she was abused already in the age of 8 or something. And then she was brought to a house outside of a city that belonged to a very old man. He was 70 years old and he was not married. And nobody knows really what happened to her in that house. But when she came back to Paris, nobody wanted to give her a job anymore. So she had to go back to this person and to live with him. And then somehow from there she started her career as a prostitute. So it's, I mean, these women must have seen incredibly things and a lot of really hard and ugly things that we don't want to know. No. But
yeah.
How did I get there? I'm always getting lost. Sorry. No, I just wanted to say, yeah, maybe if that she sees that if she's not giving the chance to that girl to have her own life, then maybe this girl would end up like her. So, and it was important for me to show that Violetta has a strong reason to leave Alfredo.